The gunshot that killed Katherine Drummond's husband echoed through the Texas plains in the spring of 1878, leaving her with nothing but a ramshackle cabin, $17, and a 3-year-old daughter who still asked for her papa every night. 7 years had passed since that terrible day, and Katherine had learned to survive in Georgetown, Texas, through sheer stubbornness and pride. She took in washing from the ranchers and townspeople, her hands perpetually red and raw from the lye soap and scalding water. Her daughter Clara, now 10 years old, helped hang the laundry on the lines that stretched across their small property like the rigging of a great ship. The work was back-breaking, but it kept a roof over their heads and food on their table, even if that food was usually just beans and cornbread. Katherine stood at her washboard on a sweltering August morning, her dark hair escaping from its pins and sticking to her neck. She was 28 years old but felt ancient, her youth stolen by widowhood and poverty. Through the steam rising from the washpot, she could see Clara sitting in the shade of their lone oak tree, mending a tear in her only good dress. The sight made Katherine's heart ache. Her daughter deserved so much more than this hardscrabble existence. "Mama, someone's coming," Clara called out, shading her eyes against the sun. Katherine straightened, pressing a hand to her lower back. A rider was approaching on a magnificent chestnut horse, leading a pack mule behind him. As he drew closer, she recognized Harrison Gregory, the owner of the largest cattle ranch in Williamson County. She had washed his clothes a few times, though usually his foreman brought them to her. Katherine quickly wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly conscious of her shabby appearance. Harrison Gregory was a man who commanded attention without trying. At 32 years old, he sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders filling out his work shirt in a way that made Katherine's mouth go dry despite herself. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though his expression now was serious. He removed his hat as he approached, revealing dark hair slightly too long and in need of a trim. "Mrs. Drummond," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "Mr. Gregory," she replied, wiping a strand of hair from her forehead. "I was not expecting your laundry today." "I am not here about laundry," he said, dismounting with easy grace. He glanced at Clara, who was watching with undisguised curiosity, then back at Katherine. "I wonder if I might speak with you about a matter of some importance. It is of a personal nature." Katherine's stomach tightened with anxiety. Personal matters were rarely good news. "Clara, go inside and start on your lessons," she said. "But Mama, I have not finished mending yet. Inside, please." Clara went reluctantly, casting backward glances at the tall rancher. Harrison waited until the door closed before speaking again. He seemed uncomfortable, turning his hat in his hands. "Mrs. Drummond, I will speak plainly because I am not a man skilled in fancy words. My wife died 2 years ago. Perhaps you heard." Katherine nodded. Everyone in Georgetown had heard. Margaret Gregory had died of a fever, leaving Harrison alone on his vast ranch. "I am sorry for your loss. I know the pain of it." "Then you understand what I am about to say might seem sudden, but it comes from much thought." He met her eyes directly, and she was struck by the intelligence and kindness she saw there. "I need a wife. My ranch is prosperous, but a house without a woman is just a building, not a home. I have no children, and at my age, I had hoped to have several by now. You need security and a better life for your daughter. I am proposing a marriage of practical arrangement." Katherine felt as though the earth had shifted beneath her feet. She gripped the edge of the washboard to steady herself. "Mr. Gregory, I hardly know what to say. We have spoken perhaps 3 times in passing. I know it seems irregular," he said, taking a step closer, But hear me out. I have watched you these past months. You are a hard worker, devoted to your daughter, and you carry yourself with dignity despite your circumstances. Those are qualities I admire. I can offer you a good home, security, and a father for Clara. She needs a father, and I need you both." The words hung in the air between them. Catherine's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. It was not unheard of in the West for marriages to be arranged for practical purposes. Many widows remarried quickly, and many men needed wives to help run their homesteads. But this was Harrison Gregory, one of the wealthiest men in the county. Why would he choose her? "I appreciate your offer, Mr. Gregory, but I must ask why me? Surely there are many women who would be better suited to be the wife of a successful rancher. Women from good families with dowries and education." Harrison looked out across the plains, squinting against the sun. "I do not want a woman who sees me as a means to wealth or status. I have had enough of people wanting things from me. You have survived 7 years alone, raising your daughter through circumstances that would have broken most people. That takes strength. And Clara, she is a good child. I have seen how she helps you, how she tries to make things easier. Children reflect their upbringing." Katherine felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had praised her mothering in 7 years. Most people in town viewed her with pity or vague disapproval. A young widow struggling to maintain respectability while doing the work of a washerwoman. "You speak kindly, Mr. Gregory, but marriage is a serious matter. I cannot simply agree based on practical concerns." "I am not asking you to love me," he said quietly. "I am asking you to consider a partnership, respect, kindness, and a shared household. Perhaps in time affection might grow, or perhaps not, but you would have security and Clara would have opportunities. I could send her to school properly, see that she has nice things, and you would never have to scrub another person's dirty clothes until your hands bled." He had noticed her hands. Katherine instinctively tried to hide them in her apron, but Harrison reached out and gently took one of them in his own. His hands were large and calloused from ranch work, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. He turned her hand over, examining the raw skin, the calluses, the redness that never quite faded. "These hands have worked hard enough," he said. "Let me give you a different life." Katherine pulled her hand back, but not roughly. Her heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "I need time to think about this, Mr. Gregory. It is a momentous decision." "Of course. Take all the time you need." He settled his hat back on his head. "But know this, Mrs. Drummond. I am sincere in my offer. I have no interest in taking advantage of your situation. If you agree, you would be my equal partner in all things. The ranch would be as much yours as mine. Any children we might have would be heirs to everything I have built. And I would treat Clara as my own daughter from the moment you say yes." He mounted his horse with the easy grace of a man who had spent his life in the saddle. "I will return in 3 days for your answer. That should give you enough time to consider without rushing you." Katherine watched him ride away, her mind whirling with possibilities and fears. She stood there long after he disappeared from view, until Clara emerged from the cabin. "What did Mr. Gregory want, Mama?" Katherine looked at her daughter's earnest face, at the dress that had been mended so many times the original fabric was hard to distinguish, at the shoes that were too small but would have to last another season. "He made me an offer, sweetheart. A very serious offer." "What kind of offer?" "The kind that could change everything." That night, after Clara had fallen asleep on their shared straw mattress, Katherine sat by the single candle they allowed themselves and tried to think clearly. Marriage to Harrison Gregory would solve all their material problems. Clara could go to school properly, wear nice clothes, eat regular meals. She would have a father figure, something Katherine knew her daughter desperately wanted even when she did not say it aloud. But what about Katherine's own heart? She had loved her husband John deeply. They had married young, full of dreams and passion. His death had devastated her. Could she marry without love? Could she share a home, perhaps a bed, with a man she barely knew? Yet Harrison Gregory seemed different from other men. He had not looked at her with pity or hunger. He had looked at her with respect. He had noticed her hands, her struggles, her dignity. That counted for something. The next morning, Katherine made inquiries in town, trying to be discreet but knowing that in a small community like Georgetown, discretion was nearly impossible. What she learned surprised her. Harrison Gregory was universally respected. His ranch hands spoke of him as a fair employer who paid good wages and treated his workers well. The shopkeepers said he was honest in his dealings. The few women who felt comfortable gossiping with a washerwoman mentioned that he had been devoted to his late wife and had mourned her deeply. "Why do you ask?" Mrs. Patterson, the baker's wife, asked with a knowing gleam in her eye. "Has Harrison Gregory taken an interest in you?" Katherine felt her face flush. "I am simply curious. He brought his laundry personally the other day and I wondered about him." "Oh, just curious, are you?" Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Well, I will tell you this, Katherine Drummond. If Harrison Gregory is paying you special attention, you would be a fool to turn him away. He is a good man, and those are rare as hen's teeth in this territory. A woman in your position cannot afford to be too particular." The words stung, even though they were true. Katherine thanked her and left with the bread she had purchased, Clara trailing behind her. On the walk home, Clara was unusually quiet. "Mama, are you going to marry Mr. Gregory?" Katherine stopped in her tracks. "How did you know about that?" "I heard him talking." "I did not mean to eavesdrop, but I heard him say something about marriage and needing a wife." Clara looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Are you?" Katherine knelt down so she was at eye level with her daughter. "I do not know yet, sweetheart. It is a big decision. How would you feel if I did?" Clara bit her lip, thinking, would we live on his ranch? Yes. Would I have to call him Papa? Only if you wanted to. He said he would treat you as his own daughter, but I would never force you to call him anything you did not feel comfortable with. Would you be happy? The question caught Katherine off guard. When was the last time someone had asked if she would be happy? "I think I could be content. Mr. Gregory seems like a kind man. We would have a good home, enough to eat. You could go to school properly." "But do you love him?" "No," Katherine admitted. "I do not know him well enough to love him. But sometimes, sweetheart, love grows over time. Your father and I loved each other very much, but we also grew up together. This would be different." Clara considered this solemnly. "I think you should say yes. I know you are tired, Mama. I see how your hands hurt and how you cannot stand up straight sometimes after washing all day. If marrying Mr. Gregory means you do not have to hurt any more, then I want you to say yes." Katherine pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, fighting back tears. "When did you become so wise?" "I learned from you." The 3 days passed slowly. Katherine worked mechanically at her washboard, her mind constantly returning to Harrison's proposal. She imagined what life might be like on his ranch. She had heard it was a beautiful property with a proper house, not just a cabin. There would be ranch hands to help with the work, food in abundance, and security she had not known since before John's death. But more than the material comforts, she found herself thinking about Harrison himself. The way he had looked at her hands with such compassion. The respect in his voice when he spoke to her. The promise to treat Clara as his own. These were not the words of a man looking for a housekeeper or someone to warm his bed. These were the words of a man who had thought carefully about what he was offering and what he was asking. On the morning of the 3rd day, Katherine woke early. She bathed as best she could with their limited water supply and put on her only decent dress, a blue calico that had been her Sunday best for 5 years. She braided her hair carefully and pinned it up, wishing she had a mirror to see if she looked presentable. Clara helped her, standing on a chair to fix the pins in back. "You look pretty, Mama." "Thank you, sweetheart." Harrison arrived precisely at noon, as though he had timed his journey to be neither too early nor too late. Katherine invited him inside their tiny cabin, suddenly ashamed of its bareness. There was so little furniture, just the bed, a table with 2 chairs, and a shelf for their few dishes and supplies. Harrison removed his hat and seemed to fill the entire space with his presence. "Would you like some water?" Katherine asked, her voice tight with nervousness. "I am afraid I have nothing else to offer." "Water would be fine, thank you." She poured water from their bucket into a tin cup, trying to keep her hands steady. Harrison accepted it with a nod of thanks but did not drink immediately. He was looking at Clara, who sat on the edge of the bed, watching him with solemn eyes. "Miss Clara," Harrison said, addressing her directly, "your mother and I need to have a serious conversation, but I want you to hear it too because it concerns you just as much. Would that be all right?" Clara nodded, looking surprised that he was asking her opinion. Harrison turned back to Katherine. "Have you had time to think about my proposal?" "I have thought of little else," Katherine admitted. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Mr. Gregory, I want to be honest with you. I am afraid. Afraid of making a mistake, afraid of marrying a man I do not know, afraid of losing what little independence I have managed to maintain these past 7 years. But I am also practical enough to know that what you offer would change my daughter's life for the better. For her sake, I am willing to accept your proposal, but I have conditions." Harrison's expression did not change. "I expected you would. Please tell me what you need." "First, I want Clara to be legally adopted by you if we marry. I want her to have the same rights and inheritance as any children we might have together. I will not have her treated as less than." "Agreed. I already intended to see to that immediately." "Second, I need time to adjust to this arrangement. I am not ready to share a bed with a man I barely know. I need us to build trust first." Harrison nodded slowly. "The ranch house has several bedrooms. You and Clara can have your own rooms, or you can share if that makes you more comfortable. I will not press you for anything you are not ready to give. When and if that changes, it will be your decision." Katherine felt a weight lift from her chest. She had been most afraid of this part of the bargain. "Third, I want to continue to have some independence. I do not want to feel like I am just trading one form of dependency for another. I want to have a role on the ranch beyond just housework. The ranch will be your home too. You can be as involved in its operation as you want to be. My late wife kept the books for a time, and she also had her own project with chickens and a large garden. The house and everything around it are within your domain. I trust you to manage it as you see fit." Katherine looked at Clara, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Then my answer is yes, Mr. Gregory, I will marry you." For the first time since she had met him, Harrison smiled, and it transformed his whole face. He was handsome when serious, but when he smiled, he was something else entirely. "You have made me very happy, Katherine. May I call you Katherine?" "Yes, of course, and I should call you Harrison, I suppose." "I would like that." He stood and extended his hand to her. When she took it, he squeezed gently. "I promise you will not regret this decision. I will do everything in my power to be a good husband to you and a good father to Clara." Clara slipped off the bed and came to stand beside her mother. Harrison knelt down so he was at her level. "Clara, I know I am not your real father and I will never try to replace him. But I hope in time you might come to think of me as someone you can rely on, someone who cares about you." "Will you teach me to ride a horse?" Clara asked. Harrison's smile widened. Absolutely. Every person living on a ranch needs to know how to ride. It will be one of the first things we do. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Georgetown. Katherine wore a new dress that Harrison had insisted on buying for her, a lovely green fabric that brought out the color of her eyes. Clara stood beside them in a new dress of her own, blue with white ribbons. The ceremony was short and practical, with only a few witnesses present, but Katherine felt the weight of the vows she was making. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her cheek gently, a gesture of respect rather than passion. Katherine was grateful for his restraint, even as part of her wondered what it would be like to be kissed by him properly. After the ceremony, they rode out to the ranch in a wagon loaded with Katherine and Clara's meager possessions. It was a 2-hour journey from Georgetown, through rolling hills dotted with cattle bearing Harrison's brand. The land seemed to stretch on forever, golden grass rippling in the breeze like waves on an ocean. "This is all yours?" Clara asked, her voice filled with awe. "Ours," Harrison corrected gently. "It belongs to all of us now." The ranch house came into view as they crested a hill, and Katherine caught her breath. It was far larger than she had imagined, a proper 2-story structure built of wood painted white with a deep porch that wrapped around the front and sides. Trees had been planted around it, providing shade, and she could see the sprawl of outbuildings beyond, barns and corrals and storage sheds. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It will look even better once you add your touches to it," Harrison said. "Margaret had a gift for making things welcoming, but since her death, it has been just a place to sleep. I am hoping you can make it a home again." Several ranch hands had gathered near the barn, curious about their new mistress. Harrison introduced them one by one. There was old Walter, the foreman who had worked the ranch for 20 years. Young Tom, barely 18, who handled the horses. Miguel and his brother Carlos, who had come up from Mexico looking for work and stayed because Harrison treated them fairly. And half a dozen others whose names swam together in Katherine's overwhelmed mind. They all greeted her respectfully, tipping their hats and welcoming her. She could see curiosity in their eyes, but also approval. They were glad their boss had found someone, she realized. They wanted him to be happy. Harrison carried their belongings inside while Clara ran ahead, exploring with the delight of a child who had never had space to run. Katherine followed more slowly, taking in every detail. The house was indeed beautiful, with real glass windows and wooden floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot. The main room was large, with a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. The furniture was simple but well made, built to last. "The kitchen is through here," Harrison said, leading her through a doorway. "I kept a cook for a while after Margaret died, but she left 6 months ago to care for her sick mother. I have been making do with what the hands cook in the bunkhouse, but I admit I miss home cooking." The kitchen was spacious with a large cast iron stove, shelves full of dishes and supplies, and a table big enough for a large family. Katherine ran her hand over the smooth wooden counter, hardly believing this was now hers to manage. "Upstairs there are 4 bedrooms," Harrison continued. "The largest was the room I shared with Margaret, but I have been sleeping in one of the smaller ones. I thought you and Clara might like to choose which rooms you want. Take the largest if you prefer. I truly do not mind." They climbed the stairs, Clara racing ahead. The main bedroom was indeed spacious, with a large bed covered in a quilt that must have been Margaret's handiwork. There was a dresser, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and even a rocking chair by the window. Katherine felt like she was intruding on a shrine. "I cannot take this room," she said softly. "It was yours and Margaret's." "It is just a room," Harrison said, but his voice was gentle. but I understand if you are not comfortable. Choose whichever room feels right." Katherine chose a smaller bedroom next door, one that faced east so the morning sun would wake her naturally. Clara picked the room across the hall, delighted to have a space all her own for the first time in her life. Harrison carried their bags up, and Katherine began the process of unpacking their few belongings into the drawers and wardrobe that were now hers. That first evening was strange and awkward. Katherine prepared dinner with ingredients from the well-stocked pantry, making beef stew and cornbread. It felt surreal to cook with such abundance, to not have to worry about stretching every ingredient to its limit. Harrison praised the meal extravagantly, and Clara chattered about everything she had seen, the horses and the barn cats and the incredible space she now had to explore. After dinner, Harrison excused himself to check on the hands and the livestock, giving Katherine and Clara time to settle. They cleaned up together, and then Katherine tucked Clara into her new bed, a real bed with a feather mattress instead of straw. "Mama, is this really going to be our life now?" Clara asked, her eyes wide in the lamplight. "It seems so, sweetheart. I like Harrison. He is kind, not scary at all. I am glad." Katherine smoothed Clara's hair back from her forehead. "But remember, this is still new for all of us. We need to be patient and do our best to make this work." After Clara fell asleep, Katherine went downstairs and found herself alone in the large main room. She sat in one of the chairs near the fireplace, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. Through the window, she could see Harrison talking to Walter near the barn, their figures illuminated by lamplight. She tried to imagine what her life would be like now. She was married to a man she did not know, living in a house that still held memories of his first wife, responsible for managing a household far larger than anything she had ever attempted. The weight of it all pressed down on her. The door opened, and Harrison stepped inside, hanging his hat on a peg near the door. "I hope everything is all right. You looked lost in thought." "Just trying to take it all in," Katherine admitted. "This morning I was washing other people's laundry in front of a cabin that barely stood straight. Now I am mistress of one of the finest ranches in Williamson County. It is overwhelming." Harrison pulled a chair closer to hers and sat down. "I imagine it is. I am sorry if I have pushed you into this too quickly. I know my proposal was sudden." "No, I am not having regrets, just adjustment." She looked at him, this man who was now her husband. "I want to thank you for being so patient and understanding about the sleeping arrangements. Many men would not be." "I meant what I said. I want this to be a partnership built on respect. Intimacy without trust is just using someone, and I have no interest in that." He met her eyes steadily. "Tell me about yourself, Katherine. I know the basic facts, that you are a widow who worked as a laundress, but I want to know more. Who were you before life became about survival?" The question surprised her. "I grew up on a small farm about 50 miles east of here. I was the youngest of 5 children. We did not have much, but we were happy. I loved to read when I could get my hands on books. I learned to sew from my mother and to shoot from my father. John, my husband, was the son of a neighboring farmer. We knew each other from childhood and married when I was 19. He wanted to try ranching, so we came west with big dreams and not much else." "What happened to him, if it is not too painful to speak of?" Katherine's throat tightened. Even after 7 years, talking about John's death was difficult. "Rustlers. They came in the night and tried to take our small herd. John confronted them and one of them shot him. He died before morning. The sheriff tried to find the men responsible but never did. After that, I was alone with a young daughter and no way to support us except through washing." Harrison was quiet for a moment. "I am sorry. That must have been terrifying and heartbreaking." "It was the worst time of my life, but I survived it and so did Clara. We are stronger for it, I suppose. Tell me about Clara. What is she like? What are her interests? Katherine found herself relaxing as she talked about her daughter. She told Harrison about Clara's quick mind, her love of stories, her talent for drawing even though they could rarely afford paper and pencils. She talked about how Clara wanted to learn everything, how she asked endless questions, how she had taught herself to read better by looking at every scrap of newspaper or poster she could find. Harrison listened intently, asking questions, seeming genuinely interested. She sounds remarkable. I would like to get her proper school books if that is all right, and art supplies. Talent like that should be nurtured. She would love that. She would probably love it even more than learning to ride horses. Then she shall have both. They talked long into the evening, the awkwardness between them gradually easing. Katherine learned that Harrison had come to Texas from Missouri after the war, working his way up from a ranch hand to foreman, before saving enough to buy his own land. He had built the ranch through hard work and smart decisions, running cattle to market and investing his profits back into the property. Margaret and I had 5 good years together, he said. We were building something, planning for children, planning for the future. When she died, it felt like everything stopped. I kept working because that is what you do, but the joy went out of it. The ranch was just a business, not a home. You must have loved her very much. I did. But life continues, and I am not the kind of man who does well alone. I need purpose beyond just accumulating cattle and money. I want to build a family, create something that lasts beyond me. He looked at Katherine seriously. I hope you do not feel like you are competing with her memory. What I had with Margaret was good, but it is in the past. You are my present and my future now. Katherine felt something shift in her chest, a warming toward this thoughtful man who spoke so honestly. I appreciate you saying that. I have been worried about living in her shadow. You will make your own mark on this place. Already having you and Clara here has changed the feel of the house. It feels alive again. The days began to settle into a rhythm. Katherine woke early, as she always had, but now to cook breakfast for Harrison and the hands rather than to start laundry. She found she enjoyed cooking when she had good ingredients to work with, and the men were appreciative of everything she made. Clara began lessons with a tutor Harrison hired from Georgetown, a young woman named Miss Sarah who came 3 days a week. On the other days, Clara helped around the ranch, learning to care for the chickens. Katherine had started raising and beginning her riding lessons with Harrison. Katherine watched from the porch one afternoon as Harrison patiently taught Clara to mount and dismount a gentle mare named Daisy. He was careful and encouraging, praising each small success and helping her overcome her fear when she wobbled in the saddle. He is good with her, Walter said, coming to stand beside Katherine. The old foreman had taken to giving Katherine updates on ranch operations, teaching her the business side of things. He is, Katherine agreed. Better than I expected, honestly. Mr. Gregory is the kind of man who does things properly or not at all. When he said he would treat your daughter as his own, he meant it. Walter pulled out his pipe and began packing tobacco into it. If you do not mind me saying so, madam, you have been good for him too. He smiles more than he has in 2 years, seems lighter somehow. Katherine felt warmth spread through her chest at the words. She had been so focused on how this arrangement benefited her and Clara that she had not thought much about what Harrison was getting from it beyond the abstract concept of a wife and potential children. As the weeks passed, Katherine found herself increasingly drawn to Harrison. She began to notice small things about him. The way he was always gentle with the animals, even when frustrated. How he treated the Mexican hands with the same respect he showed everyone else, something not all ranchers did. The way he read each evening from books he pulled from a shelf in the main room, improving his mind even after a long day of physical labor. He was also consistently kind to her in ways both large and small. When she mentioned wanting to expand the garden, he had several hands help her break ground for a larger plot. When she struggled with the account books, he sat with her for hours teaching her the system until she felt confident. When Clara fell sick with a fever, he rode through the night to fetch the doctor and sat up with them both until they knew she would be fine. It was after Clara's illness that something shifted between them. Katherine had fallen asleep in the chair beside Clara's bed, exhausted from 2 days of worry and nursing. She woke to find herself covered with a quilt and Harrison sitting in the other chair, watching Clara sleep. "You should be in your own bed," Katherine whispered, not wanting to wake Clara. "So should you, but I understand not wanting to leave her. She is all I have. If I lost her—" Katherine could not finish the sentence. "You will not lose her. The fever has broken. She is going to be fine." Harrison reached across the space between the chairs and took Katherine's hand. "But you are wrong about one thing. She is not all you have anymore. You have me too." Katherine looked down at their joined hands. Harrison's hand was so much larger than hers, rough with calluses, strong from years of ranch work. But his grip was gentle and warm. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. "I am beginning to realize that," she said softly. They sat like that through the rest of the night, hands clasped, watching over Clara together. When morning came and Clara woke asking for water, her fever completely gone and her eyes clear, Katherine felt Harrison squeeze her hand once before letting go. Something had changed between them that night. There was a new easiness, a sense of being partners not just in name but in reality. They began to seek each other out during the day, sharing small conversations about nothing important but weaving a connection nonetheless. Harrison started coming in for coffee in the afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table while Katherine worked, telling her about his day and asking about hers. One evening, about 2 months after the wedding, they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the hills. Clara was inside drawing at the table, content and absorbed in her work. The air was finally cooling after another sweltering day, and Katherine felt herself relax into the rocking chair. "I have been thinking," Harrison said, his own chair creaking as he rocked slowly. "There is a dance in Georgetown next Saturday, a harvest celebration. I thought perhaps we might go as a family, introduce you properly to the community as my wife." Katherine felt a flutter of nervousness. "I have not been to a dance in years. I am not sure I remember how. It will come back to you. Besides, I am not exactly light on my feet either. We can be clumsy together." He glanced at her with a slight smile. "I think it would be good for people to see us, and Clara would enjoy it. There will be other children there." "All right," Katherine agreed, "but I will need a suitable dress. I cannot wear my work clothes or my wedding dress again." "We will go into town early on Saturday and get you fabric. You can sew, can you not?" "Yes, but there is not enough time to make a dress before Saturday." "Then we will see if Mrs. Patterson has something ready-made. I want you to have something nice, Katherine. Something that makes you feel beautiful." She looked at him in surprise. "You think I am beautiful?" Harrison's expression grew serious. "You do not see it, do you? You spent so long just surviving that you stopped seeing yourself as anything but a pair of working hands." "But yes, Katherine, I think you are beautiful. I thought so the first time I saw you, hanging laundry with the sun in your hair, your chin up despite everything life had thrown at you." Katherine felt her cheeks flush. "I did not realize you had noticed me before you made your proposal." "I noticed you long before that. It took me months to work up the courage to approach you. I was afraid you would refuse me, that you would think I was taking advantage or that you would still be too devoted to your late husband's memory. Why did you approach me when you did?" Harrison was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. "I saw you one morning in town. You were carrying a heavy basket of laundry and a group of men made some crude comment. You ignored them with such dignity, but I saw how your hands shook after. I wanted to protect you from that. I wanted to give you a life where you did not have to endure such disrespect. I went home and realized I had been a coward for waiting, so I rode back the next morning and made my offer." Katherine remembered that day. She had been so embarrassed and angry after those men's comments. She had gone home and cried, something she rarely allowed herself to do. The very next day, Harrison had appeared with his proposal, and her life had changed forever. "I am glad you came," she said softly. "I was drowning, though I would not have admitted it. You threw me a lifeline. You saved yourself and Clara through 7 years of struggle. All I did was offer you a boat." They smiled at each other, and Katherine felt her heart flutter in a way she had not felt since she was a young girl falling in love with John. It was not the same feeling, she realized. It was different, built on different things, but it was real nonetheless. Saturday arrived with Katherine feeling more nervous than she had on her wedding day. They went into Georgetown early, and Harrison took her to the general store where, to her amazement, Mrs. Patterson had several ready-made dresses in stock. Katherine chose a deep burgundy dress with black trim that fit her surprisingly well with only minor adjustments needed. Harrison also insisted on buying Clara a new dress, and the girl twirled in front of the mirror in a yellow dress that made her look older than her 10 years. He bought them each new shoes and ribbons for their hair, refusing to listen to Katherine's protests about the expense. "You are my wife," he said firmly but kindly. "It gives me pleasure to buy you nice things. Let me have this." The dance was held in the town hall, a large building that served multiple purposes in the small community. By the time they arrived in the early evening, it was already crowded with people from all over the county. Katherine held tight to Harrison's arm as they entered, feeling the weight of curious stares. Harrison introduced her to what seemed like dozens of people. Ranchers and their wives, shopkeepers, the banker, the mayor. Everyone was polite, welcoming her as Harrison's wife, but she could see the speculation in their eyes. They were all wondering why Harrison Gregory had chosen to marry a washerwoman widow when he could have had his pick of women. If Harrison noticed the whispers, he gave no sign. He kept Katherine close, his hand on her back or holding her arm, making it clear that he was proud to have her as his wife. When the dancing started, he led her onto the floor for a waltz. "I warned you I am not graceful," he murmured as they began to move. But he was better than he claimed, or perhaps they just fit well together. Katherine found herself relaxing into his lead, letting him guide her through the steps. It felt good to be held by him, to be this close, to feel the strength in his arms and the warmth of his body. "You are a natural liar," she said. "You dance perfectly well. Maybe I just have good motivation to do my best." They danced 3 dances together before Harrison released her to speak with some business associates. Katherine found herself standing with a group of ranchers' wives who were curious but kind. They asked about her adjustment to ranch life, about Clara, about her plans for the house. "Harrison seems very happy," one of them said, a woman named Ruth whose husband owned the neighboring ranch. "We were all worried about him after Margaret died. He threw himself into work and seemed to forget about living. You have been good for him." "He has been good for us too," Katherine said honestly. She spotted Clara across the room, playing with a group of children and looking happier than Katherine had seen her in years. This new life was good for her daughter, giving her opportunities and experiences that would have been impossible before. Whatever Catherine's own uncertainties, she was grateful for that. The evening wore on with more dancing, food, and conversation. Harrison danced with her several more times, and she noticed that he was careful to give her attention throughout the night, making sure she never felt abandoned or overwhelmed. When Clara grew tired, he was the one who noticed and suggested they head home. The ride back to the ranch in the moonlight was peaceful. Clara fell asleep between them on the wagon seat, her head on Catherine's shoulder. Harrison drove with easy competence, the horses knowing the way home. "Did you enjoy yourself?" he asked quietly, not wanting to wake Clara. "More than I expected. People were kind. They can see what I see, that you belong with me as my wife and my equal." Catherine looked at his profile in the moonlight, at the strong lines of his face, the capable hands holding the reins. "Harrison, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I think I am beginning to develop feelings for you. Real feelings, not just gratitude or respect. It frightens me a little." Harrison pulled the wagon to a stop on the empty road. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Why does it frighten you?" "Because I did not expect this. I thought this would be a practical arrangement, a business partnership. But you have been so kind, so patient, so good to both Clara and me. I find myself thinking about you during the day, looking forward to our evening talks, noticing things about you that make my heart flutter. I am falling in love with my own husband, and I do not know what to do about it." Harrison reached out and cupped her face gently in his hand. "Catherine, I need to be honest with you. I had hoped this would happen, but I did not want to push or pressure you. I have had feelings for you since before I proposed. Real feelings, strong feelings. I chose you not just because you needed security or because I needed a wife. I chose you because something about you called to me. Your strength, your dignity, your devotion to your daughter. I wanted you in my life not as an arrangement, but as a true partner. Why did you not tell me this before? Because I was afraid if I came to you declaring love, you would think I was trying to manipulate you or take advantage of your situation. I wanted you to come to care for me naturally in your own time without pressure." His thumb stroked her cheekbone gently. "But since you have been brave enough to speak first, I will say it. I love you, Catherine, not as a replacement for Margaret or as a convenient wife, but as you, yourself. I love your quick mind and your gentle hands. I love how you hum while you cook and how you read to Clara every night. I love the little crease between your eyebrows when you are concentrating on the account books. I love who I am when I am with you." Tears slipped down Catherine's cheeks. "I love you too. I think I have been falling in love with you for weeks now, but was too afraid to admit it even to myself." Harrison leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Catherine did not want to pull away. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. This kiss was full of emotion and promise, gentle but passionate. A real kiss between two people who had found something unexpected and precious. Clara stirred between them, mumbling in her sleep, and they pulled apart reluctantly, both smiling. "We should get her home to bed," Catherine said, her voice slightly breathless. "Yes, we should. But Catherine, I want you to know that nothing has to change immediately. Just because we have admitted our feelings does not mean you have to give up your room or feel pressured in any way. I know, and I appreciate that, but I think I am ready for things to change. Not tonight with Clara between us and exhaustion pulling at all of us, but soon." Harrison's smile was like the sunrise, bright and warm. He kissed her once more, quickly, then set the horses moving again toward home. The next few weeks were a time of adjustment and growing intimacy. Catherine and Harrison began to act more like a true married couple, stealing kisses when Clara was not looking, holding hands as they walked around the property, sitting close together in the evenings. They talked about everything: learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Katherine learned that Harrison wanted at least 4 children, that he had always dreamed of a large, boisterous family. She told him she wanted children too, that Clara needed siblings, and she wanted to give Harrison babies of his own. They talked about names they liked, about how they would raise their children, about the values they wanted to instill. One evening, about 3 months after their wedding, Katherine stood in the doorway of Harrison's bedroom. He was reading in bed, a lamp casting warm light across the room. He looked up in surprise when he saw her. "Katherine, is everything all right?" "Everything is fine. I just decided that I am tired of sleeping alone. If your offer still stands, I would like to share this room with you." Harrison set his book aside and stood, crossing to her. "Are you certain?" "I do not want you to feel obligated. I am certain. I love you, Harrison. I want to be your wife in every way." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I love you too, more than I have words to express." That night, they became husband and wife in truth, and Katherine discovered that physical intimacy with someone you loved and who loved you back was a beautiful thing. Harrison was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed that was now theirs, talking quietly until they fell asleep in each other's arms. Clara adjusted well to the new sleeping arrangements. She was happy to see her mother happy, and she had grown to genuinely love Harrison. She had started calling him Papa Harrison, which delighted him every time he heard it. The ranch thrived under their joint management. Katherine proved to have a head for business, catching errors in the account books and suggesting ways to economize without sacrificing quality. Harrison valued her input, consulting her on major decisions and trusting her judgment. By the following spring, Katherine knew she was pregnant. She told Harrison one evening after Clara had gone to bed, and his joy was almost comical. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down, looking worried that he had hurt her or the baby. "I am fine," she laughed. "I am pregnant, not made of glass. I know, I am just so happy, a baby, our baby." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Boy or girl, I do not care. Healthy is all that matters. I hope you mean that, because I suspect we might have several of both before all is said and done. Good. I want the house full of children and noise and life." Their son was born that November, a healthy boy with dark hair and his father's strong features. They named him Henry, and Clara was beside herself with joy at having a baby brother. She appointed herself his guardian, constantly checking on him and helping Katherine with his care. Watching Harrison with their son, seeing the tenderness and love in his face as he held the tiny baby, Katherine felt her heart overflow with happiness. This man who had offered her a practical arrangement had given her so much more. He had given her love, security, family, and a future full of promise. 2 years later, they had another son, James, and 2 years after that, a daughter they named Margaret after Harrison's first wife. Katherine had suggested the name, wanting to honor the woman who had been part of Harrison's past. He had cried when she proposed it, touched by her generosity of spirit. Clara grew into a beautiful and accomplished young woman, attending a finishing school in Austin for 2 years before returning to the ranch. She never forgot that Harrison was not her blood father, but she loved him as much as if he had been. When she married at 19 to the son of a neighboring rancher, Harrison walked her down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. The ranch continued to prosper. Harrison and Katherine worked side by side for decades, building not just a successful business but a legacy. They had 6 children in total, each one loved and raised with the values of hard work, integrity, and kindness. On their 20th anniversary, Harrison surprised Katherine with a trip to San Antonio, leaving the ranch in the capable hands of their older children for a week. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and spent the days exploring the city like young lovers. "You ever regret it?" Harrison asked one evening as they walked along the river. "Marrying me in such a rushed, practical way, missing out on a romantic courtship." Katherine stopped and turned to face him. At 48, he was still handsome, his dark hair now streaked with gray, lines around his eyes deeper but his smile still the same. She was 44, her own hair showing silver, her body marked by bearing 6 children, but she knew he still saw her as beautiful. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me and Clara a new life when we desperately needed it. You loved us when you did not have to. You have been the best husband and father I could have ever asked for. Our courtship happened after marriage instead of before, and that made it even more special because we chose each other every single day." "I would choose you every time," Harrison said, pulling her close. "In every life, in every circumstance, I would still choose you." They kissed there by the river, two people who had started with a practical arrangement and built one of the great love stories of their time. Years continued to pass. Their children grew and had children of their own. The ranch expanded, with some of their sons taking over portions of the land to run their own operations. Clara and her husband settled nearby, and Katherine delighted in being a grandmother. As they grew older, Harrison and Katherine spent more time simply enjoying each other's company. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over land they had built together. They talked about the past, about their children and grandchildren, about the life they had created. "You remember the day I rode up to your cabin?" Harrison asked one evening when he was 62 and Katherine was 58. "Of course. I thought you were crazy proposing marriage to a woman you barely knew." "Best crazy thing I ever did." He squeezed her hand. "She needs a father and I need you both. That is what I said to you." "But I was wrong." "Wrong how?" "I did not need you. I desperately wanted you. There is a difference. I had survived 2 years alone. I could have survived the rest of my life that way, but I did not want to just survive. I wanted to live, and I wanted to live with you." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, he could still move her with his words. "You gave me the same gift. Before you, I was surviving. After you, I was living." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. Two people who had found each other against the odds and built something lasting. Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74, with Katherine beside him holding his hand. She mourned him deeply, as did all their children and grandchildren and the community that had watched them build their life together. But she did not regret a single day. They had been given 38 years of marriage, filled with love and partnership and the kind of deep companionship that many people never find. Katherine lived another 12 years after Harrison's death, surrounded by her large family. She watched her grandchildren grow and met several great-grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about how he had been kind and strong and had loved his family more than anything. On the day she died at age 70, peacefully in her sleep in the house that had been her home for so many years, her last thoughts were of Harrison. She imagined him waiting for her, that smile on his face, ready to take her hand and walk beside her once more. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through their children and their children's children. But it was always remembered as the place where a struggling widow and a lonely rancher had taken a chance on a practical arrangement and found the kind of love that poets write about. Clara, who lived to be 82, told the story often to her own grandchildren. "My mother and father proved that love can grow anywhere, even in the most unexpected places." They taught me that family is built not just on blood but on choice, on commitment, on showing up every day and choosing each other over and over again. That is the legacy they left us. And it was a legacy that lived on long after they were gone, in the land they had built together, in the descendants who carried their blood and their values, in the memory of two people who had started with nothing but practical needs and ended with everything that mattered.